There we are. Live. Get all my perfect. Do it. Hello and welcome to I guess Indie Bandits on YouTube. We've shifted away from Twitch as of late, not because we're angry or anything, but this has just become an easier way for us to stream. And today, myself, Joe, if you're looking at the video and reading, in the doobly doo bit underneath me is my name. I'm Joe, and I'm joined by Jimmy, fellow Indie Bandit.
Hello.
And today we're going to just look through some of the raw data that we've got from
Oh, that
the.
sounds juicy, doesn't it? Strap
Uh,
yourselves in. We're looking at raw data today.
yeah, I know. We're just bringing the kind of content the internet loves. I mean, here we're working with what we've got. You know what? And it's only going to get better. I mean, I like my steak rare anyway, so if we're going to go with the raw analogy, it doesn't need much more cooking, but yeah, we have this juicy raw data to go through. Just few
Yum.
seconds on either side, and it'll be done. Well, when we're done, obviously, you know what I mean, finished. Anyway, that analogy broke down really quick. So we did a series of Twitter polls uh, towards the end of last year. This is our second year of doing this. Last year we had the State of Independent Games report that we put out, and we had a whole article series and marketing clinic videos that we did, and they were rather popular. People seem to get a lot of value out of them. So, in preparation for doing that again this year, we're just gonna again back on that raw data. We're gonna look at just look at some of the polls we did and just chat with each other, get our first thoughts on what the data is kind of showing us, and then in before the end of the year, you can look forward to obviously all these thoughts having been fleshed out and hopefully providing some really valuable insights into indie devs, how they work, how they market their games, and just mainly where the community's at the moment.
Yep, sounds good. Let's get to it.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, all like I said, these were all done on Twitter polls until we have a better way of doing this. This is a serviceable solution to get a lot of information from participants without actually asking people to sit down and do a kind of like a long survey. It's not
Yeah.
we can get more responses from the community doing it this way than we feel we could if we had a kind of full integrated survey that we sent out to people. So this is the reason we did it on Twitter, because we have a nice Twitter following who engage these with this kind of content when we put it out there. So we put out Twitter polls. We did quite a large number of them. I think there were maybe, from the top of my head, I can't remember. I think we did about 50. We did 50 different Twitter polls, and we had a good number of respondents. I think nearly, yeah, close to 7,000 answers on these Twitter polls across the 50 of
Yes,
them.
so when we're not talking about like a small sample size here, it's a fairly considerable number of people that take the polls. So
Yeah, and obviously we can't. Few upfront issues, obviously, with the way we do this is that we can't guarantee the respondents are the same for every poll, and we can't necessarily guarantee that they're all our followers, because the polls that get a good amount of traction obviously get served to accounts that don't necessarily follow us, or even accounts that have maybe never even interacted with the Indie Bandits community any way, shape, or form. But there's very little to be gained by fake answering the polls, and to counteract that, most of the polls have a like I don't want to answer option on them. So if people do just want to see the results of the polls when they're up on Twitter, they do have an option that won't, well, hopefully
yeah,
won't skew our results.
yeah, because that's the key thing is you don't just want people to put an answer they don't actually want to put just so they can get a look at the results. So yeah,
Yeah,
I guess within the parameters of what can be achieved, we've tried to keep it as honest as possible so that the results are showing an accurate response of where independent games are for each of the various different questions that we've asked.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's that any of the like results are miles off what the truth would be. I think that's the say. I
No.
think I'm fairly confident there's a high degree of accuracy that this is representative of the indie devs in our community. This is not, the full indie game development space. These are, we have a very specific kind of indie dev community that is not fully representative of all indie game development in the world. This is what's representative of the people who tend to follow and interact with indie bandits.
Yes.
So, should we look at the some of the first ones? So we have, we asked a lot of different questions about game development. Things are, the reasons behind making games, what their marketing efforts are, what their budget is, not specifically what their budget is, but whether they have a budget, what kind of, but what kind of their financial background, even their like educational background. There's a lot of different questions and a lot of I think interesting insights we can get out of this. So one of the first like key areas we did the like who, what's, and whys of of game development. And the first main area we look into is why are people making games? And I'm sure that's a question that most devs end up asking themselves, especially when it gets very tough and they're facing that uphill struggle of finishing a game, getting it noticed, and kind of thing. So we asked immediately if the reasons behind making games. So we have the poll. One of the first questions we ask is, what is the main reason for making your indie game? And this is just most of the polls you'll find are these kind of binary options because Twitter, now X, doesn't really offer much in the way of nuance. So we try and make everything just very clear and try and remove any kind of gray area so that like respondents aren't confused about which answer they should put. So the first one is asking why are you making your game, either for fun or for work. And this is important to us as well because this is how we can best help our community, because these are two very different ways to make indie games. So the results of this one is predominantly uh, for fun. We have a community that's about two thirds developers who identify as amateur developers or hobbyist developers, and then we have a third who are uh, doing this professionally. Now, obviously, devs may not consider themselves professional if their game is like pre-revenue or they're doing out of their own pocket. So there's that, there's definitely that to consider. I think this doesn't truly indicate how many of them want to make money with their game. I think that's an important distinction we should probably recognize here.
Maybe a bit of imposter syndrome as well, just not thinking, oh well, I do this for fun. They might think they want to make money from it, but it's like, oh, but I'm not a professional game developer, so I'm not going to call myself that. And
Yeah, or it's my
also,
first game. I'm not
yeah,
established in the industry, so there is that to contend with. But it's good to know where we're coming from here because
yeah. And there's
like,
still some people in the response as well who say, well, it's fun now, but I would like to develop games professionally. So it's almost like I'm doing this to maybe learn or get my feet in the door, and then my hope is to become professional. So maybe hobbyists now, but professional a little ways down the line.
yeah, there were a
So
lot of
it's not
comments
just
and
as black and
replies.
white, I guess,
Yeah,
as
there was a lot of comments and
this or that.
replies to that poll of saying like, yeah, I'm doing it for fun, but I hope it becomes my job.
Yes.
So that so don't think just because the majority of our community identifies as amateur or hobby devs that they're not developers with aspirations of turning their game development into a professional activity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's also, for us, it's important to know that these are the people who are in our communities. It affects how we like to communicate with the whole community, knowing that they are, I guess, aspirational devs. I think is if we had to pigeonhole the entire community, which is not useful or wise, but say who the community is in one word. Well, that's not one word either. Jesus, long day. But we have a community of aspirational devs. I think would be fair to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this if when you look down, really drill down to it to find the ones who are purely making games just for a hobby, just for fun, is probably going to be quite a small percentage, really. But at the minute, it's kind of skewed that way a little bit because yes, people either don't believe themselves to be professional or they don't feel they're quite in a position yet where they want to make games professionally. But that is, as you say, the aspiration.
This is also, this is something that like next year we might tweak that question so that we can reflect that nuance. We've done that. There was a few questions we asked this year that we hadn't asked at all last year, or that we changed from last year to this year, just because of the responses we had from the previous year. So this is a question that I think these 2 years has been quite fine, but obviously as we delve into it, we see that we may need to ask this question or ask multiple iterations of it to really drill down into how much are they making games for fun and how much are they professional, and what, where would they sit on a more of a spectrum between the two than just this binary option.
Yep.
So we'll jump on to the next one of the next big questions we asked, and this was about team size and asking devs how many people were they working with on their game. And this is one that we did change from over the course of the year. So initially we had in first year we did this. We had the options of solo dev, and then I think the answers were 2 to 10 people, and then 10 plus. But then we ended up with results that were such a huge number of respondents had put 2 to 10 that it felt like the range was too big. Because that obviously, because it covers from 2 to 10.
Yes.
Every dev that's working with like one other person still gets lumped into this potentially 10 people group.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
we reeled that back and changed the responses from 1, 2 to 5, and then 6 plus. Because when we spoke to people, it sounded like not many of them were actually working in groups of 10. So we halved that kind of border area for that, and then we found that we had closer to, say, about half were solo devs, which again
Yep.
kind of tracks with the for fun. And not that solo devs can't have professional aspirations, but if you're working on your own, this is something you can do within your own time constraints. And
Yeah.
it felt that these numbers tracked with the same kind of percentages we were seeing for the professional and amateur split in the pool. We had it was there were about twice as many solo devs as the 2 to 5 group, and then we did see a massive drop off at 6 plus as well. So I think we kind of hit the right groups there.
Yeah, and obviously that also tracks as well. It's a similar percentage in the 2 to 5s as was in the believe themselves to be professional from the previous poll.
Yeah.
Which again tracks because if you're working with other people in a team, the objective probably is in most cases to make a product and sell it, rather than just do something for fun, which is more likely to be something you would probably do on your own. So it seems to track across the two.
Yeah, this is what we a lot of what we found last year as well, that we had no real issues with the data. Like there was nothing that like really shocked us, especially when you look at obviously the not professionalism, but obviously the reasons for making a game, and then the team size. A lot of this stuff all tracked and became obviously quite obvious as we looked through it. There were some issues that we'll get onto in a bit, but it wasn't issues in the data or the polls themselves. It's something else that we talked about at length last year, and I think we're gonna find some of the same issues occurring this year as well. But we'll get onto that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had another one looking at academic qualifications and if any of the devs have academic qualifications specifically in game development. Now, obviously, this is not us gatekeeping and saying that you can or can't make games without the right degree or anything like that. That's not the reason we're asking, but it was interesting, just as from a perspective of video game development education, whether the people who go into indie games, especially in our community, have done so from an academic background, and they didn't. The results were pretty much overwhelming in the sense that most people did not have an academic qualification specifically in game development. The results were about two-thirds said no, and the remaining third was split across those who do and those who had replied other, and most of the comments in that were they had something game development adjacent, but not specifically in game development. So they might have had a computer science background or an art and design background or something. A degree in a skill that could be used
Beneficial.
in
Yeah.
game development. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, that one. I just say that, I guess it really tracks into the idea that building an independent game, regardless of if it's a fun thing or a hobby thing for you or a professional thing, is often driven from a point of passion rather than, thinking, oh, I've just thought of this fantastic business idea. I'm going to put loads of time and effort into indie games because that's a really easy sort of thing to go do. Like, you have to be passionate about independent games to go into making one, if you're going to do it for fun or if you're going to do it to try and make money. And the idea that a lot of indie devs, two-thirds, have self-taught themselves the skills that will be needed to make that, totally tracks with the idea that there's a lot of passion in the community.
Which also probably is reflected why they would see themselves more as hobbyists.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
obviously, I mean, people often conflate the idea of being a professional whatever with their academic qualification as well. You could say, I mean, we could say, I don't think I've ever heard you call yourself a historian, James, but you technically are. But you're not a professional historian because you're not getting
no,
paid for it. If we were going to go that way about it, like
yeah,
using professional in its literal sense, rather than
yeah,
rather than in the way people tend to use it as professional being good at something, which is obviously I don't think that's the way anyone felt the word was being used in the poll. But we had also added that by the sense of professional being for work. That was in the poll
yeah.
responses as well.
Meant,
We weren't conflating
yeah.
professional with skilled or good at what you do.
No, we were definitely. It was the literal sense of the word, as in, do you want to make money from this? Is
Yeah,
this a profession? Is this a professional endeavor, or is this a? I don't care if anyone plays this game. I'm just making it for myself.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which I think was we'll see if we as we move on to the next section. Now we know from that data we have an idea of who is in the community, where they're coming from. It's a lot of you know identifying as hobbyists with no academic background in game development who are mostly working on their own. So we've got our community is full of a lot of lone devs, solo devs who just anecdotally speaking have just a really strong passion for games and for creating games, and they'd have to because of the very sense that they're doing this all under their own steam. Like, this is all something that they've just decided they're going to do with no real background in game development.
hmm
So we'll move on to the next main section, which is how do we make games, is what we called it in last year's report. And these are the questions we asked about what financial background they have, not the devs themselves, but the actual projects, and whether whether they have funding, and whether or not they are which aspects of the game the developers are doing themselves and what they're outsourcing. So this is kind of questions about workflow and funding. So that the first couple of questions we asked about was their budget. So we asked if they just straight up if they had an actual budget for their game, which again is where you start to see whether it is a hobby endeavor or a professional endeavor. And we got again close to 2/3 saying they had no budget, but there was a again, this is open to interpretation on how they wanted to obviously understand budget by, because it doesn't mean they're not spending any money on their game. Some might see it as, do I have an actual allocated budget that I'm drawing from? Others might have seen it as, am I spending money on making my game, or am I just using my own time as the funding for the game, rather than actual monetary value to fund production. And obviously about a third saying they do, again kind of tracks with the almost exactly with the professional results that we saw previous.
Yeah.
And then we also asked the question that,
We do have that comment as well, though, which I quite liked in one of them, where that someone argued the point that technically every game has a budget, because if you're spending your time on it, then that is potentially billable time that you could sell to an employer or
yes,
to a freelance client or whatever. You're choosing to spend that time building the game yourself, but your time is worth something. So
of course, yeah,
it's a good way to think about it, even if that's not technically what we meant. We meant the other way, but it was just a good point that someone raised, which is always worth thinking about if you are building your own games.
yes, because sometimes you've got to think about the fact that the time you're allocating to something could be spent earning money. So like the commenter said, it has value, and it is a cost that you are putting into the product, even if like there's no money changing hands because of it.
Yes.
The theoretical money that your time is worth is being spent in this project. So obviously, if you spend 10,000 hours making a game, then if you'd spent that moonlighting or doing another job, that's how much the game technically has cost you. If you needed to put a financial value on the time spent, then you could simply just count the hours. And also, I think they also put the point of forward that just the cost of like running your computer and like electricity and like having the
Yeah,
lights on
exactly.
and
Yeah.
all these other things, like time is money in a very literal sense. Obviously, like you said, that wasn't really the what we were looking for with the question, so we might have to change the wording on that next year. But it was more a case of, do you have like a budget structured for the game?
Yeah. Is
Which
there a stack of cash that you have in the bank that you will spend on various aspects of developing a game?
and even just the idea of like, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
Does your production process have an amount of money allocated to it? Like, have you allocated this money in your head? Because we obviously speak to a lot of devs who say my game has no budget, and it's like, are you spending any money on the game, or are you just not thinking you are? And you know,
Mhm.
that's worth knowing. And then we also asked, we're into marketing. We asked if they had a marketing budget.
Which
Uh,
essentially to the same, almost identical response,
yeah, it did, and it
which
feels like
made
obviously the ones
sense.
who have a budget are allocating some of that to marketing, and those who aren't,
Yeah.
like, does not apply. Which it might be
It would have
worth.
been weird had we been getting some totally different
Yeah,
percentages.
if
Yeah.
like 90% of people say I don't have a budget, but I've got a marketing budget, you're like, okay, you're gonna have to explain how that works. But no, fortunately the results were exactly the same. So
Yeah.
data's good.
Yep.
Which obviously when we asked about outsourcing and how much of game development the devs are actually uh, doing themselves, obviously we've got a lot of solo devs, so it would make sense that you know most of the work is being done by themselves. If they're in a team of one, then they probably do everything themselves. So when we asked about music production, Again, similar numbers, said, I'm making the music myself. I'm not outsourcing it to anyone else. So there's no one else on the team employed to do that. And we also asked about art as well. Art was outsourced even less than music. Music was, I think, music. I don't know why, but I can only imagine because it's a kind of different kind of skill set to art. And I'm not saying anyone can do art, but I think the tools are more readily available to start creating art assets
Have we got the
digitally.
same thing? Because I'm seeing marketing, yes, at around 85%, art assets, yes, at 79%, and music at 51%.
Yeah, that's so only 51% of people are making their own music for the game.
Yes, which I guess makes sense because that's going to be a much harder.
Yeah, I feel music again, not shitting on artists or anything like that. They're all very valuable skills, but I think you can create visual assets in a way with modern digital tools in a more accessible way.
Yes, it's more accessible. It's not harder or easier. It's just more accessible. Like
Like,
anyone, most people have a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen. Not everybody's rocking an instrument, like
yeah, and even if you're
it's
like
more
trying to
accessible.
create music through your like keyboard, and I mean like a keyboard with letters on it, not a keyboard
Yeah.
with keys on it. Well, they all have keys. God, we need some better terms for these. But yes, I think there's just something about with music. Then you also have to be, I guess, like proficient in maybe in at least one instrument. You'd hope,
And
or
there's
something like that.
possibly as well a knowledge of the theory behind it. I know obviously the more you know about art and
There's
art
art
theory as
theory as
well,
well, but
but I think most people could, you give, again, I'm not trying to detract away from it. I consider myself to be an artist as well, but if you give someone a pencil and a piece of paper, they could quite happily immediately start drawing. If you gave someone a keyboard, they would, I mean, they could quite happily hit the keys, but like, I feel like they'd be less tempted to. They'd probably be. It would feel a little bit more intimidating, I think, than it would with the to draw something. That's why I'm trying to use the term more accessible rather than like easier or harder. It's
I
just
think there's a reason that Pictionary exists as a game and a musical equivalent where they give you a keyboard and you have to try and bang out a tune and get people to guess it
yeah,
doesn't
exactly,
exist. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's the best way I can say that the shows off the accessibility of creating something visual,
yeah,
even
yeah.
with a pen and paper or like kind of any kind of digital drawing tools versus doing it musically. But again, could be
Yeah,
completely
exactly,
wrong
yeah,
there, but
yeah,
that seems to be what our information suggested.
yep.
And we did the same question about marketing materials as well, in case they were outsourcing marketing, and obviously no surprise there. This was almost as much as art assets. Most of the devs, nearly 90% of them, I believe, were making their own marketing materials because obviously a lot of them are solo devs going it alone and just are doing any kind of organic marketing they can generally through social media. But we'll get onto the social media stuff in a bit. But yeah, they're all mostly doing everything themselves.
Yes, which makes sense, as say we had the majority of people say that they were building a game on their own, so it totally makes sense.
Yeah, and the same track when we asked them if they were working with a publisher, which opened a whole can of worms about whether a game with a publisher can be indie, and we're not
Yeah.
here to talk about what is and isn't indie. It was the very first article
Mm.
on our website to try and structure like what games we include, but that definition later evolved into anybody that feels we could help them with their game is indie enough for us.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't consider someone who's developed their own game looking for someone to help them publish and market that game as being now no longer independent. I don't consider that at all. I think if you work with a publisher, you're an independent studio, as in you don't answer to anybody, you create your own games, you have full creative control over your games, then you are an independent developer. And if you choose to work with a publisher or not, it doesn't have any impact on whether or not you are an independent developer.
yeah, I mean, like, everyone seems to have their own definitions of this as well, which is
Yeah.
why we've always tried to make it like very vibe based. Like,
Mm.
if you want our help, then we're willing to offer it. We're not gatekeeping anyone. There's not, I mean, we even had
Yeah, yeah.
someone ask to have their game featured on the site, and they'd the one I think the only time I felt like I had to say like everyone's indie, but I don't feel you're indie because they'd secured like $10 million of funding. And I'm like, I'm not here to say if you are or aren't indie, but I don't think you're really representative of the community we've got here, especially from what we've seen in these polls. I don't think
Yeah, it's a
anyone.
tricky one, that isn't it? Because that's like, are they independent? As in, do they have full? The way I would consider it is like you answer to no one in terms of what does and doesn't go into your game. Like, it's my game. I build it, whether it's professional or hobby. Like, I'm not being told by a higher power or other creator what to do with my game. It's my choice. I'm independently in control of this. So by that,
Like
they
the
may have
creative
ticked the box.
control argument is that like
Yeah,
if you have full creative control of your project, then you are independent. But they'd gone through actual rounds of fundraising, and
and then you might argue at that point they probably
stock
don't have full.
no, it's like not
Yeah,
stockholders, shareholders. Sorry,
yeah, because you don't often get money from people without them wanting to put their
no,
opinion
no,
into
no,
it. So
no one funded $10 million, and it's like from small investment firms, and these weren't like bursaries or grants or these kind of things that come without.
yeah, like VC funding type of thing. It's
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was millions of dollars in venture capitalism.
yeah.
So
At that
people,
point, you're probably like, if you
their
dug a
fingers
little
are in the
deeper
pie.
there, you yes, there's it's like you're probably not fully independent anymore.
No, no,
Which
and
is no like slight on the way they've done it or the quality of the game or the legitimacy about like of how they wanted to create the game or their intentions or anything. It might turn out to be fantastic and all that stuff, but just by what we would consider to be independent, it didn't feel like it ticked our boxes.
no, and they weren't, and I didn't feel like it was something that we could uh, host on the site at the expense of the other devs in the community. It's like obviously we
Mm.
try and help everyone, but if featuring their game would have cost another developer with zero budget and zero funding who'd reached out to us, I
Mm.
would have felt bad that someone would have lost their space on, in an article for something with something that probably has more money behind it than the entire community's games combined. Like,
Hmm.
anyway, so yeah, the question about working with a publisher opened a few cans of worms, but I've always maintained that there are also independent publishers as well who like have made working with indie games their like raison d'etre. They've
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
they want to work with games and like just they just find they find games, or they have game devs reach out to them, and they are just happy to make sure that more eyes get on the game and they boost sales and kind of leave all the creative in-game decisions to them, and they're more like marketing assistants for the games. They do all the marketing stuff that the devs don't necessarily want to do. So I don't think you lose your indie badge by working with a
No,
developer.
not at all.
So yeah, but most of them weren't working with a publisher, but many expressed a willingness to do that as well, which was nice. Other
Hmm.
than a few semantic arguments about what isn't an indie game, most of the respondents to that seem to say like, I'm not, but I would happily do it. Like none of them,
Yeah.
not none of them, but very few of them were that bothered about the notion of working with a publisher.
Hmm.
So always good to know. Um, so we get place. Ah, yes. We asked if they also asked if they enjoyed marketing their game. Obviously, we're both marketers, but this is something uh, that we've not fallen into, but over the years, obviously, anyone who's followed us for a while might know that we didn't kind of start out like this. We were originally just like doing a whole kind of like indie game fan site with reviews and stuff, but then we found a developer community, and obviously we've always been here to like celebrate indie games. And when we found out our community was predominantly devs, then we shifted what we were doing. And because our backgrounds in marketing, we've always had this kind of marketing focus and helping independent developers with their games from a marketing background. We never we don't ever wade in and like tell devs what they should and shouldn't do with their games. It's not our place, and you know we like the variety that comes with independent game development, that you wouldn't want to stifle that by just like trying to get everyone to make the same game or the game you like. So we never really weigh in with opinions of that, but we did ask if they liked marketing. Any any guesses on how that went, Jim?
Uh,
Yeah.
yes, pretty much like what we get from like anecdotally, not even just through the polls, but whenever we talk about marketing with the community on Twitter, we typically always get a very similar response: is that independent developers, most of them anyway, even regardless of whether or not they see marketing as something that's important, which it definitely is, they just don't really enjoy it very much because they feel it takes time away from them doing the development, which is the thing they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
They don't know where to start, so they feel at a complete loss before they begin, um, or they have tried it and it hasn't worked, and so they've sort of considered the whole thing a waste of time. So it's usually one of those three things that I guess is the reason why most indie devs aren't big fans of marketing their indie games.
I think, and I can't put all the devs in the community, but obviously, again, anecdotal evidence, yeah, from
Yeah,
speaking to devs, I think there's also a lot of the devs I've spoken to that don't like marketing or don't want to market their game. I think is coming from a sort of like fundamental misunderstanding of what marketing is, or maybe not understanding the nuance and broadness of what constitutes marketing, because so many different actions could be considered marketing, that I think they only think of the kind of, I don't know, suit and tie business meetings, kind of,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
this doesn't fit with my own identity as a solo indie dev against the world kind of thing, trying to make the game that like AAA companies won't. Like indie game dev is pretty like punk rock, it's
Yeah, yeah,
in
definitely.
essence. And but it does have to straddle this like horrible line between that and also, if you have any professional aspirations, you will have to do things that will help your game to sell, which is the broadest possible definition I can give for marketing, is just
Yeah.
activities that make your product or service sell more than it would without them.
Yes, without the bit where you tell someone that you're working on the game and that they can buy it, the likelihood of them ever knowing what it is you're doing and ever finding your product to buy is like almost zero. So marketing is absolutely essential for every single product that's ever been developed, regardless of, indie game or not. You have to tell people what it is you're doing and where they can purchase it if they're interested.
Yep.
But as you say, there's an element of um, it being seen as the more corporate side of indie game development. So it's often kind of shrugged off or pushed aside, or I'll do that when I get, when I can. I'll do it when I get round to it, type of thing.
And often as an
Um,
afterthought as well. Like I said, when I get
yeah,
round to it,
yeah,
but like almost like, oh, maybe I should do some marketing. I've spent, 20 hours
yeah.
this week. I mean, you know, some people more, some people less. I'm not going to say how many hours you need to work on your game, but what I would recommend, work on it a sustainable amount.
Yeah.
Just for your own mental health and well-being, and just to keep you on track. But people will say, I've worked X hours on development now, uh, don't have any time left to market, or they don't allocate any time for marketing, or they're just done. That they've worked too hard on development. They're just like, I can't be asked doing any marketing now. I've spent hours on my game. Just leave it at that.
The fear of, I think often maybe the fear of failure kicks in there as well. So the idea that, like, oh well, I've worked all this time on this game. Now I actually have to go out and hear what people think about
Yeah,
it.
people can react to your
Exactly. Like,
content.
I don't, if I never tell anyone about it, I can't ever hear bad things about my game. Um, but yeah, that it's if you want to make money from your game, then marketing is it's a well,
Non-negotiable.
exactly, yeah, it's a non-negotiable. You have to do it, and you have to be willing to put up with the fact that not every single person out there is going to have something positive to say about what you created as well, because the world is just not like that. Um, the hope is that enough people will, that you'll be able to make a living from it, and
Yep.
that's really all you need to care about.
Well, we also asked them about some of the like marketing, I guess marketing adjacent issues. I guess we asked them whether they like what kind of platforms they were on and social media, whether they had a website, and which socials they were using for their game. When we asked whether they had a website for their indie game or studio, uh, most said yes. Twice as many developers in the community have a website for their game or studio than don't, which is
Yeah,
good because I think for a long time
makes
we've
sense.
we've maintained that while it's nice having your game on a storefront, and you basically have to have it on a storefront if you want to get any visibility and have it sell, because the storefronts, or well, or for consoles, obviously you have no other choice. There's like no other way to sell your game other than these storefronts, unless you're selling a physical copy, which again, indie devs don't tend to make physical versions of their games anymore, just because of the inherent cost in doing that. Whereas for PC, obviously you've got Steam and Itch and Game Jolt and all that kind of crack on. But these aren't your platforms, and I think we've said this in the marketing clinic last year when we were talking about the results from the previous year. It's good to have something that like you own and control, not just because you're not at the behest of like a Musk, basically. What if someone comes in and decides to fundamentally change this platform?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Your own website can have all, not only all your information that you control, and you control the full visibility on that particular site. Like any visitor, you fully control all the content they get to see on said site because it's yours. You also get to control all the surrounding branding and everything. You can, obviously, just like from like a visual and artistic perspective, you can really hammer home the identity of your game and like give it a visual identity and strong branding, which is not something you can necessarily do as much. I know you can have banners and logos and all this kind of stuff, but everyone's profile kind of looks the same on socials. That's how it's not MySpace. You can't throw on some HTML and have glitter rain
uh,
down it, which was kind of dope and terrible and so like early internet. But still, it
Yeah.
allowed for that customization, which, you know, was good and bad in a sense. But with your own website, you can do whatever, you can do whatever you want, and you don't have to worry that it's gonna be like have the rug pulled from under your feet at any given moment. Whereas,
No, it's like I think the analogy that gets used all the time when it comes to the reason for a website, and in particular, say in my world anyway, a blog on your website is not building your house on borrowed land.
yeah,
You know, your house, your website should exist on something you own, which is, your presence should exist on something you own, which is your website. You can absolutely build the paths that lead to your house on borrowed land, so you can use platforms and channels and various different places to get the attention of people and navigate them towards your house. But you want to own where your house is built. So
yes,
having a website is, to me, just like marketing, is a non-negotiable. You should have one. I know it's easy to make a Facebook page, but it's really cheap and easy to build a website these days as well. It costs pennies over the course of a year to have a simple website. So definitely something.
even like a URL, like there's
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's
just
like,
own that. Yeah,
and I know a lot of the excuses we often hear anecdotally is I have no budget, and I can't speak for the financial situation of every dev, but
yeah,
in most cases, I feel that the devs we talk to could afford a URL for the year. Like
yeah. I mean,
it,
what just said, the domain might cost you
pennies a
10,
month. Like
10 quid for the year.
some are
Um,
even cheaper if you get it right. I mean, if you have a game with a
yeah,
really like unusual name, or even if you're hosting it through like your studio's name, then
yeah,
in that case you don't even have to like worry too much about that. You can find like a version of any site that's got any URL, sorry, that's like very affordable. Obviously, if you want like reallycommonword.com, you're gonna have to pay a flipping
well,
fortune.
that's
But
in
even then, if you have
thousands.
like
Yeah.
really common word
Mm.
thegame.com, you normally find it's much cheaper. And again, the URL itself is not as long as it's the actual name of the game and not something completely different, or the name of the studio and not something completely different, then you're going to be fine, and it's going to be worth paying pennies a month, or like you said, like a
Yeah,
tenner a year. It's not a
you're
huge.
talking very affordable sums of money to own a domain, and then you could say, I mean, WordPress is free. You can download a theme onto your WordPress and just add some content to it. And there's a bunch of others like Wix and Squarespace and all
Yeah.
these other platforms that offer a free version or a very, very low paid subscription to host a platform. I mean, you're talking like for less than, I'm probably exaggerating this as well, but for less than 50 quid a year, you could have a domain and a website registered with all the pages you're going to need to add content, a contact form, links out to your storefronts, and so that just gives you somewhere that you own that contains the information about your game that you can point everybody at, and that can't ever be held to the whims of the social media algorithm.
Or the social media owners as well.
Yeah, or them. So yeah, it's like, okay, the fact that like most of them have it, great, but like that's something that I would like to think over the next few years is going to get closer and closer to 100%, because it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, the obviously, like you said, want you want to own the land you build your house on. Obviously, the paths don't necessarily need to be. And speaking of the paths, we asked about the various socials. This was at a time before Musk, I think. Say so. We didn't
Pre
ask about
Musk.
pre Musk. We didn't ask about some of the other social media platforms that started being talked about once Musk took over, and people try to find like Twitter parallels.
Yeah,
Obviously,
because there's Mastodon and Threads right
Mastodon
now.
and Threads, and is it Blue Sky as well?
Yeah, so like they're not included in this.
No, we hadn't asked about those. Worthwhile maybe talking about them next year, just to because there were obviously like supposed exoduses to these platforms, and
They weren't really though, were they?
then it didn't. Yeah, that was a anyway.
Because
So
people were probably very unwilling to like give up the audience that they developed. Now, the argument of whether or not it's still worth being on those platforms is an argument for a different. It's a different conversation entirely. But yeah, Twitter's still fairly. It's got a large user base.
Twitter's doing fine, even if it is a horrible hellscape at times. But it it
It's
still
just
has
the
the
internet, though,
users and
isn't
the
it?
audience and stuff like that. It's like it still kind of does what it's always done. Um, so whatever. So we asked people if we didn't ask them if they had Twitter because these polls were on Twitter, and obviously you've got to take a huge pinch of salt. You know, take these with a huge pinch of salt because we asked people on Twitter about their other social media use. So
Yeah,
obviously, most people tend to have a favorite social media platform. So I feel that these mightn't be fully representative of the community's social media use because we were asking our community on one particular platform about their other
yes,
use. And I feel if we'd asked on other platforms, then obviously, if we'd done a poll on Facebook, if they had Twitter, we'd probably see lower, kind of low numbers as well. So when we asked on Facebook, the majority said, when we asked about Facebook, sorry, the majority said they did not have Facebook. And then about a third, no, more than a third, said that they did. But Facebook was majority no. Almost exactly the same numbers for TikTok. And Instagram was closer to a 50-50 split, though it was more in the favor of not having it than having it. So it again, this is not, you know, fully true. We can't guarantee that this is how all devs do their social media, but from obviously again more anecdotal evidence from me from seeing developers' websites and when I look for social media handles to tag developers in,
hmm
Twitter and Instagram are still very, very popular. They're the most, if you see a developer whose website only has a handful of socials on it, Twitter or X now is usually one of them, and Instagram's also very popular. Uh, Talking to devs as well, there seem to be this dislike or distrust of Facebook, and a lot of devs who were like quite vocal about their hatred of Facebook or something like that, or like I guess we're too old now to understand like Facebook's for old people, whatever stuff like that. But having no concerns with Instagram, even though it's the same company, but but didn't
yeah.
have time to pick apart that, and I didn't want to say, yeah, it's cool, you've got Instagram, it's the same company, right? But there was a lot of like, I don't trust Facebook with my data, but I do Instagram. It's like it's all meta. Sorry.
It is, but also I just don't see how one of those social platforms is worse than the other. They're all doing the same thing. They're all
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
like
It's
if something is free to use online, then
you're the
you're the
product.
product.
Yep.
You're giving your information to them, and they are using the fact that you are part of their audience to sell advertising, sponsorships, whatever it is. Um, and really, at the end of the day, how much of it do you really legitimately care about? If you're willing to use that platform because there's value in it for you, then giving up your email address, found in 99 cases out of 100, is that's what I'm willing to give up to get the value back the other way. So yeah, it was interesting to see the differences, and I guess this is probably the one area of the report where, as you said before, the results probably aren't as like legit or as accurate as they could be, just because we were asking people who for some reason get very sort of partisan about being part of one social media platform over another social
Yeah,
media
yeah. The
platform.
social media tribalism makes this all very, very weird, and obviously, with the year Twitter and X has had the last 12 months for that platform, there's what I can only call the lemming effect. Is see that very quickly where people want, obviously when the changes were coming through and everyone wanted to start posting their insert newly found social media platform. Like, I have no reason to back Twitter or X. I don't particularly like it, and I'm not a huge like social media user. But obviously, for indie bandits, it's a tool. Like, social media is a tool, and for game developers, it's a
Mhm.
marketing tool. Like, you can have your own personal beliefs about it, but if you're being like quite utilitarian about it, it's kind of just a necessary evil. In the modern world, especially when you need to feed people towards your game, which is likely hosted on a website, and one of the easiest and cheapest and or free ways to do that is through social media use.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And you need to separate. So I know, like, you pour your heart and souls into these games, but you sometimes have to separate yourself as like an individual human and the social media marketing efforts that you're gonna have
yeah.
to do. Like, I don't have many like active personal accounts on these websites, but for things like Indie Bandits, I'll manage them, and that's more than enough social media use for me to remain happy with. But as like you said, there's some value you get back out of them by you know providing an email address and some like usage data and all this kind of crack on,
Building your brand,
and
building
building
community,
your
like
brand, which if it's a game, like, is hugely important.
I mean, how difficult would it be for the average person to build a platform on the web upon which they can invite people to hang out so that they can then build a community on that platform to be able to build their brand? Like that would be, you're talking, tens of millions to develop something like that. Not least in how do you even attract people? What you're getting on social media is a ready-made audience of people that you can
Yeah.
then speak to. So it's, we can all have a go at the people who run these platforms, and rightly so, because that there's some proper weirdos in charge. But
Can
like the
you imagine getting so
they should be
upset at
held
people at
accountable as
social
well.
media that you buy it?
I know, like it's just mad, but conversation for a different time, I guess. But they should be held accountable, and the platforms should also be held accountable for how they deal with certain activity on those platforms, definitely. But by and large, like you're telling me, if I give you my email and sign up for an account, I can now become active with a community of potentially tens of thousands of people who are like into the same thing as me, or relevant to my work, or relevant to my hobbies. Like, yeah, I'll take that every day.
It's just a tool for connecting with an audience for your game at
That's
the
it.
end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like,
Just think about it like that. Remove all the emotion out of it and just see it
yeah,
from the most objective way you possibly can.
like owning a phone, you know, or a computer or
Yeah, exactly.
something.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, you can complain about like the societal impact of smartphones and tablets and stuff like that, and whether they're
Or the
awful, and
internet. The
or people,
internet.
yeah, or the internet, or whether people should talk to each other face to face and hang out and go for meals and stuff like that, and or the downfall of society, blah 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 blah. But if you want to call someone anywhere in the world at any given time, having a phone is dead useful for it. Whether you think it's
Mhm.
fully evil and gross or whatever, just like have a phone, choose how much you use it. Like, it's not the time to make a kind of like moralistic stand about these things if you're trying to sell your game.
No. If your audience lives there, you kind of have to be there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we also asked about some of the video-based platforms. So we asked if they had a YouTube channel. The majority of devs in our community did. The nice about twice as many did as didn't. Or, 2/3, 1/3 split thereabouts. My maths ain't great, but yeah,
Mhm.
most have a YouTube channel, and it's again, even if you don't use the channel fully to as like a social media platform in itself, you can always use it just as a video hosting platform. If you want to integrate video onto your website, you can always just embed videos. Like it's just a useful thing to have, so you can upload video. You know, it's a free way to um yeah free out free way to host video. Basically, just not another non-negotiable thing. Conversely, Twitch usage wasn't as great, but obviously that I imagine that's because of they're not developers are not streamers. Some of them,
No.
obviously, a lot of them didn't really want to be like a visible, a visible face to their brand, which is totally fine. Everyone has their own acceptable amounts of how much they want to like face their brand, or whether they want the game to be the branding itself. Some devs are really hands on and very active in the development process and the marketing of their game, and are like a personality that comes with the game.
Yeah.
And we'd recommend like doing that more than less, because people like to see people behind,
Yeah,
especially
definitely.
independent game projects.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things as well where like I don't think there's a single, apart from like people who are extreme extroverts, I think there's the vast majority of people when they first start are uncomfortable on video. It's one of those
Oh
things
well.
that like the more you do it, and the more you do it, especially in front of people that you don't know as well, so like your audience who doesn't necessarily know you to begin with, the quicker you'll get used to it, and you'll start to see it as a really great way to be able to um, share what it is you're doing and connect with the community that you're trying to build. So it's so powerful as a tool for as a content tool, as a content format, I should say. Um, that yeah, I would fully encourage people to just give it a go as well. And the main thing to think about as well is most people, especially those people who are into the game that you're producing or kind of intrigued in the project, they want you to succeed. You know, I think we have this idea in our head that like we're going to get laughed at or people are going to take the mick or something, but the vast majority of people want to see you succeed, and they're supporting you. So you know they're not going to just like hammer you because you've put a video out there.
Yeah,
Um,
especially since obviously we already know how hard it is to get anything noticed anyway. If you think that
yeah,
some
exactly.
content you create is immediately gonna like blow up and go viral and have all the kind of dickheads who hang around on the internet only to shit on things that other people have made, that's not going to happen with like the first ever video you make when you've just
But
set up
yeah,
your like social media accounts and have a very limited number of followers and engagement. Like
yeah, and those people as well who are out there who say horrible things, they do that to people who are exceptionally confident on video, who have produced the highest quality video you can possibly find. There's always someone who's going to say something nasty because for some reason they just I don't know, people do that. It's weird, but people do that. The majority of people who find your content, whether that's blogs or tweets or videos, they're interested in what you're doing.
yeah,
And video is one of the best ways that you can bring more of you to your content. And you know, human beings connect with other human beings, so the more we can bring the human side of what we're doing out, I feel like the stronger the connections that we build with people who are potentially interested in our products. So the faster you can get comfortable with video, the better. It was something I would encourage everybody to do, but I understand, I fully get that it's a the first time you do it, especially, is like it can feel very awkward, but it really doesn't take long, I don't think, to start getting over that.
yeah, it'd be daunting at first, and then
Oh yeah, for sure.
like anything, I mean, obviously if you've had any kind of experience with like public speaking, or giving presentations, or any kind of experience that you can draw upon, it's always going to help. But again, video is a bit of a different beast, because you're kind of just speaking into the void. So especially if you're doing pre-recorded content, it's very weird to just sit there and talk to nobody.
Yeah.
There's a reason like we tend not to do many streams where it's just like one of us playing, because it's all it still has that kind of awkward silence. Like we couldn't do a podcast. That's like at least I couldn't. That's just one of us. I feel it would be
It's harder. But
it'd
having a
be trickier.
conversation with someone definitely makes it easier to do for sure.
So last thing I'd like to cover. There were some other questions that I think we're running a bit long, so we'll not go through everything. But it'll all be in the report, and the first articles that go up on the website will cover it. But the very last uh, point that I'd like to talk about is the actual selling of games.
Mm.
So naturally, as you can imagine, most of the games were available on PC,
Hmm.
and then there was a massive drop off, obviously for consoles, because that's more of a development question than a marketing question. So
Yeah,
obviously, you know more platforms generally equals better for sales because you have more places to sell your game, but there are a whole host of different things you have to do in terms of development to have the game ready for the platforms, to have to be on like console. It's there's just a lot of barriers to entry that indie game developers can't necessarily afford, both
yeah,
financially and in terms of time. It's
yeah,
it's just harder to get onto consoles. They have different requirements. Obviously, like Steam has requirements and technical things that games have to pass in order to be on them, and yada 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 yada. But then you have that and the approval of you know the console manufacturers and all this kind of just more red tape and faff that the developers have to go through. And generally, the fewer barriers to entry, the more we found the indie game developers were on said platform. So Itch had more developers using it than Steam because Steam has the fee and some of the other barriers to entry. So that it was those were kind of obvious, but it was interesting to see how they actually what the kind of splits were between that. But the drop off was so sheer from PC to console. It kind of tracks with just how like little funding and how little time and how few resources the actual developers in the community have, and the kind of uphill
yes, yeah.
struggle that they're constantly fighting.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, kind of, yeah, an interesting. You do wonder if maybe over the next little while that consoles would, I don't know, look to enter the indie game market more aggressively and make it easier for people to create indie games for their platforms.
Like
But that's
like the Switch was supposed to be
something they
like
could do.
the real like champion of it, but then it gets kind of hit when you lower the barriers to entry. You also have this kind of problem that your platform becomes like just a garbage heap. Like it becomes an absolute tip because you
Yeah,
remove the barriers to entry for quality as well,
you do. Yeah, yeah,
which means obviously I wouldn't even want to call them like indie game developers. They're developers who are like, I'm gonna make some garbage and get it on a storefront.
see if I can make a sale.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it. It's like I don't even want to make a good game. I think I can just try and trick people into buying my game. So
Yeah,
it's a tough one. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that question. But
no, it was interesting to see. But not surprising, but interesting the results anyway. I
yeah,
guess from that one.
well, to finish up, I think the last question we should look at is the when we asked, "Is your indie game as successful as you want it to be?"
Mm.
And I really like this question because the gauge for success is the it belongs to the dev themselves. They can choose what the level of success they want. We didn't ask, is your indie game successful? We
Yes.
asked, is it as successful as you'd like it to be?
Yeah.
So they can set their own goals, and
Very subjective.
it's subjective. But the sad result was that most said no. Twice as many said no as yes. And obviously this isn't something we can immediately fix, but from just some of the things that we've seen, and we saw this was sadly something that hasn't changed from last year. But again, we've just seen a lot of devs either not liking or not wanting to do marketing, not being present in the spaces where you can actually market your game.
Yeah, there's a correlation there, isn't there?
There is, and you know, is I'm hoping that one year when we do this, we can turn around and say every dev is enjoying, or at least the majority of independent game developers are enjoying success, or enjoying at least a satisfactory amount of success for their own goals.
Yes, yeah. And like
But
that's why we were very keen to stress that it's not a parameter that we deem to be success. So like you've sold X number of games or you've made X number of profit, X amount of profit. It's like what you consider to be success. Like to someone that might be like, oh, somebody downloaded and played my game.
yeah, or
So it's just a hobby thing.
I have a handful of reviews on Steam. That's all I wanted.
Yeah,
I've got some great
but
feedback on
even
my game.
that's it. But even with that very subjective idea of, oh, hello, the lights are going crazy here. The ghost in the room.
Or a
Even with
rave.
that, even with that, like very subjective. Okay, that is like really putting me off. Even with that subjective slant on it, we still had, quite a disappointing result in terms of how many devs believe that their games are being successful.
Yeah, and I really want to hope that's just coming from them being really tough on themselves, and really striving always to do better or having more success.
Yeah,
But I think that it might be, from all the other information we've had, and all the discussions I've had with devs, and seeing how many indie games and fail by their own requirements.
yes,
To me, it feels like even when the devs set the bar for success quite low, they're still not happy with the success they're getting, or they're still not meeting those.
yeah.
They're not lofty goals they're setting themselves, and it's still, sadly, there are too many games not performing as well as they should.
Yeah, and like we can't fully attribute that to maybe some of like what we think is a lack of activity in some very key areas, namely one of them being marketing. But there is a correlation there,
Hmm.
and for the second year in a row, that correlation is there. And yeah, it would be nice to not see that, but I do feel that maybe devs are going to have to take a look at like what it is they are doing, maybe what it is they're not doing, to see if they can generate more success, rather than purely concentrating on the actual development of the game. Is there something else I can be doing that can have an impact on the success of my game, whatever success looks like for that developer?
Yeah, well, I think the one thing, like, if I could speak to every dev that said my game isn't as successful as I want it to be, there are like two things you can do to make your game more successful. You can make your game better. It doesn't guarantee success, or you can market it better. Ideally, you want to do both.
Yeah,
However, if you've already put a lot of time and effort and potentially money into development and very little into marketing, then surely the law of diminishing returns is already affecting development. And every minute, every pound, euro, dollar, whatever you're putting into it is really giving you very little back.
Yeah.
Polish is great in games, and obviously, the best games are all very highly polished, yada yada yada. But if you've done no marketing, you've got a load of what I'd call very low hanging fruit that you can do, a lot of very doable and cheap things that you're probably not already doing that would be a
Yeah.
better use of your time and money and resources than trying
And
to grind out a minimal improvement in the quality of the game when you could have it reach more people and the right people. And because I think every indie game, regardless of its size, quality, or scope, obviously you have to adjust your parameters for success based on that, but every game I feel has an audience. obviously
yes.
obviously a very, you'd have to say, like, a very low quality game might have a very small audience, and a very high quality game would have a very big audience, but you have to bring the two of those together. The audience, the theoretical audience for any game, has to find the game.
Yeah, and instead of thinking, oh, like this isn't successful because it's missing this feature, or what if I just tweak, as you said before, like I'll just tweak this little thing. Maybe that's the reason. Like maybe look at, as you just said, some of the very quick, easy, cheap things that you could be doing marketing wise that you can put into your schedule on a weekly basis that won't have a huge impact on your time, won't detract from your development work, but will have a massive impact compared to doing nothing or very little,
Yeah.
and could get more people seeing your game and purchasing your game. So it's yeah, I think more often than not, by saying marketing, we're not saying get a budget and spend 40 hours a week doing your marketing. It's like you could probably be doing some very easy things that are quite time efficient
Yeah.
that could have even just a small impact now. And then when you see that impact and you see how positive that impact can be, that might encourage you to do a little bit more as well. So worth having a look at whether or not you can be doing something around marketing to help boost the success of your game.
Yeah, because as we've been saying, the information we have is that marketing is an afterthought and not particularly done a lot by the community. Because we're by no means saying that devs aren't putting their, like, heart and soul into the actual development of these games. This is something we see again and again and again and again. But the only thing, we don't see any devs like half-arsing the production of their games. Most of them
No.
seem like hugely passionate and, like, willing to put, like, ungodly numbers of hours into, like, working on their game. Like, they live and breathe this project, which is wonderful, but often at the expense of doing enough or any marketing in some cases for it. And then
Yeah.
obviously, you don't know what to say, except it almost feels like too obvious that that the success won't be there. You already have everything against you by being an indie dev.
Yeah.
You are entering a space that's, like, dominated by huge projects and loads of money, and it's like a David versus Goliath setup, but you're going in there without the catapult. Do you know what I mean? Like, you haven't brought the sling or whatever it was.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's it. The the organic reach of social media and the web, your search engine results pages and things, is so diminished now. Like no one's going to do it for you. No one's going to serve an audience to you and send customers your way. You have to go out and get them yourself.
Yeah,
And
IGN's not going to be like, his
marketing,
game looks cool, let's just, like, put it on the
yeah.
front page and stuff like that. Like, it's not. I
Like you
know,
might get
like,
the
it happens
odd
occasionally.
person, exactly. Like one person might get lucky in every 10,000 where someone just gets the right feature at the right time in front of the right audience purely by fluke, and it makes their game a bestseller and they make loads of money from it. But for everybody else, the vast majority of people,
Nah.
you have to go get your audience, and that means marketing, and there's just no way around it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it at that, and hopefully you found some of these insights interesting. There'll be loads more stuff coming in the next few weeks with the actual report itself, some extra content, time permitting. We may even do the I forget what I called it, because we got the clinic and lab. At the clinic, we did some stuff, some content around the actual report, really diving into each of the sections last year. Not sure if we can fully do that this year, but we'll if we have the time to throw together some other stuff around this, then we certainly will. Obviously, if you have any ideas or requests or stuff we can do or stuff you'd need, obviously let us know. We're very community focused, and we like to try and do things that the community will find value in. You can obviously we're on all the places. Reach out to us, all the platforms you mentioned that a lot of the audience doesn't have, but we're there anyway in the event that there are potential audience members that would have them. So we have Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, uh, on YouTube if you're watching this. We also have a podcast which will be probably republished too as well. Just follow us, find us, reach out to us, and we're here to serve. I like to feel we're here to celebrate independent game development, and if you want to be a part of that with us, then you're more than welcome to get on board because we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So we'll wrap that up for there. Like, follow,
Yep.
subscribe, all that bollocks. You know what to do, and we'll hopefully see you next time. Bye from Joe.
Bye from Jimmy.
Hurrah!
Bye bye.